Welcome to Women in Focus. Our interview is continuing. Last week, we talked to Nomita Bali. Nomita is our Woman in Focus today, and we're continuing this interview because I just can't get to the part that I want to get to. So her stories are so interesting that I have to take her slowly through all of them. Nomita, most welcome in our program again.
Thank you.
So let's continue. When we ended our interview last week, you were getting into the page program.
House of Commons.
House of Commons. Wow. So a page needs to know two languages, which is the two official languages, English and French.
Yes.
And you learned French within a year, less than a year.
Yes.
So that very clearly shows your determination. What you want to get, you will get it, right? So as a page, what did you have to do, and how did you start?
It was an amazing experience. It's a 1 year where you go to school at University of Ottawa or University of Carleton.
Right.
And you work in the House of Commons. Your job is to work in the House and respond to requests from members of Parliament, MPs that are at the desk. One of the greatest honors was when they were working on the GST, and there was a filibuster, and it went all night. And they had volunteer pages coming in because you need to have pages that are there when the House is sitting. And at the end of that year experience, and I did that in 1990, the page that had the highest number of hours was asked to be the page to help with the throne speech. So that's when the House of Commons, they have the politicians go to the Senate, and the Governor General delivers the speech from the throne. And I had the honor that day to be carrying the material and beside the gentleman of the black armor and Sergeant of Arms, and at the bar, if you will, at the very back of the Senate. And the Prime Minister, who was Brian Mulroney at the time, was in the front with Ray Nittition, who was the Governor General. Right. And there were all these cameras on the proceedings, just like today. Yeah. And I was wearing something very, very heavy. It's a uniform, but it's wool. I ended up fainting. And I hit my black bracelet, hit the black rod behind me, and I landed on the feet of the then leader of the opposition. And the leader of the opposition was Jean Chrétien. And what he did was carried me out of the chambers, physically carried me out of the chambers. And immediately I came to, and they said to me, you need to leave and go down to see the nurses. And I said, no, please let me fulfill and finish my duties. And then I promise you I'll go. But don't have me leave halfway through my job. Right. So I insisted on that. I'm a little bit stubborn. And so I finished. And that evening I understood that there were many, many, many people that were telling me that Jean Chrétien was bragging that he was very physically strong and managed to carry out a young lady out of the chambers. The next day, in the House of Commons, there was a response from the throne speech, and Jean Chrétien said, Mr. Speaker, a strange thing happened yesterday. I was sitting and listening to the government go on about all the things that they're planning on doing, and there was a young Canadian who, like me, couldn't take it any longer. She couldn't take it any longer, and so she fainted. Well, I did what any other good Liberal would do. I brought fresh air back into her life, Mr. Speaker. I carried her out of the chambers, and I was in the lobby, which is directly beside the House of Commons, and watching it on the TV, and all the other pages were laughing at me, and they said, go in. And I said, are you kidding? I'm not going to go into the House of Commons and have him point at me. I said, I can't believe he's using me politically. And so I thought about it, and I thought, but I do need to thank him, because after all, he did carry me out of the chambers. That's right. So I asked for the Hansard, and I asked for a meeting to go meet him, and I did. And he signed it. I'm glad you're alive, Nomita. And we had a good laugh. And I said to him, I understand that Pierre Trudeau is coming next week for an unveiling of a statue. And he said, we're going to have some some dignitaries and pages,
Right.
he said, why don't you come along? So I had the wonderful experience of being able to observe Pierre Trudeau, who, as you know, was,
Yes.
was a big advocate of immigration.
For sure.
And-
I mean, he was the one who helped all the Ugandans
Yes.
come and, live in this country.
Yes.
Isn't that just beautiful?
And I also had the lovely opportunity to meet Kim Campbell through the
Yeah.
course of my PAGE
Right.
program. I had also taken political science in French at
Right.
the University of Ottawa. It's a bilingual university. So I took the class, and the professor said to me, you shouldn't be in this class. You're an Anglophone. We are talking about Francophone issues. And this was during the very heated time of Meech Lake and the
The Meech Lake Accord,
separatists,
yes, I remember.
all of that. So he didn't want me in the class, and I said, I fully appreciate that you may not want me in the class, but in order for Anglophones to understand Francophone issues, we need to be exposed and understand what is the divisiveness, because we're one country. So I'm going to stay in your class, and it is my constitutional right to write my exams in English, so I'm going to do that. And he said, well, I just hope you don't fail. I left and I thought, oh my goodness, I could very well fail. I've put my foot in my mouth, but I'm here anyways, so I'm going to give it my best go. I think at that time I wasn't totally afraid. I was just going to go for it. And so I wrote my notes in French, translated them into English, studied it in English, wrote my test, and the professor called me into his office and he said, I just wanted to tell you, I just marked your exam and you got 100%, and that is unheard of, and especially from you, because let me tell you, I did think you were possibly going to fail the class. So I was wrong, and I did appreciate your input and your participation in the class. So thank you. And I give him tons of credit for doing that as well, for applauding me for sticking it through. What happened from that was that there was some talk in the lobby of the House of Commons about this BC page that got 100% on a French political science class, and how this separatist professor called her in and patted her on the back. Kim Campbell wanted to find out who that page was and meet her, because Kim Campbell is from BC. And so that's how we sparked a friendship, and she became a mentor to me.
Beautiful. We're talking to Nomita Bali, who is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Our Woman in Focus today is Nomita Bali. So Nomita, we were talking about you meeting all the politicians. I would have thought that you would have gone into politics because you were so close to whatever was happening, but you chose to choose your profession, legal profession. Although I do know that people who are in legal profession do choose to go into politics. So do you think you would do that later on?
No, I don't think so. I admire the amount of dedication that politicians have to trying to make a difference. But my observation, being in the House of Commons as a page, working on a campaign, was that it's tireless work. It's thankless work. And you're under the scrutiny of a microscope constantly. And I really wanted to make a difference at a community level. I wanted to do that in a nonpartisan way, so that I could look at any particular issue and say, what do I think is the right way to deal with that issue, and not feel confined, not feel confined to a political party to do that. So I also knew and hoped that one day I would have a family, and I knew that if I wanted to have a family, that being a politician takes a lot of time away from family life.
So as a child, you told me in our interview that mom and dad were quite strict, so no meeting boys. So how did you meet your husband?
I met him through a mutual friend. She was working with him, and she was brilliant, beautiful, and Manuel is my husband's name, was her boss. And she kept telling me, you have to meet my boss. And I said, why? She said,
your friend said that?
My friend said that. She said, you're his perfect match. he's going to meet you, fall in love with you, and marry you. And at that time, I was a young prosecutor. I was really focused on major crime files as a junior, and I didn't want to dedicate any time to dating.
And what was he doing?
He was at the time a director in the Ministry of Finance. So he was a director at the young age of 30.
Right.
And I was, so he was very successful at a very young age, very driven as well. So she kept trying for about 6 months to get us to meet, and neither of us were interested in being set up. And one day she finally planned it and said, you have to come. The other is coming, and it would be really rude if you don't show up.
She said the same thing to both of you.
She said the same thing to both of us. We met, and my first impression was he was very engaging, very enthusiastic, fun. But it was around Christmas time. It was 1999. And I wanted to spend New Year's with my parents.
Right.
So it was the first year in many years that I was in town. And so my mom...
So this was in Ottawa?
This was here in...
Oh, okay.
I met him in Victoria.
Oh, I see.
So this was 1999 to 2000. At the time, my mom was still working, and she was working night shift. So the plan was that my dad and I would go to my mom's work with champagne
and surprise
her and toast her, and that's what we did. So fast forward a month later, I was walking to the courthouse, and I encountered Manuel on a bicycle.
Yeah.
He stopped, asked me how my family was, how my Christmas was, and asked me if he could walk me to work. And I said, well, you're on a bicycle. And he said, oh, that's okay. He got off his bicycle and he walked me all the way to the courthouse.
Right.
And that one gentlemanly gesture was what told me I needed to get to know him a little bit. Now, I know what you're going to ask. How did my dad ever manage to approve of him?
Yeah.
So you know my dad is an athlete.
Yes.
And my brother is also very athletic.
Right.
And I am a wannabe athletic person.
Right.
I try very hard, but they're better than me, clearly, in tennis and most sports. My husband is also an athlete, and he's competitive. And I've never won in any sport with my husband. So I thought, I might just get my chance when we come to White Rock. And my dad didn't know Manuel very well. He just knew he was my friend.
Yes.
And we played tennis. And I said to my dad, he's got a bad knee.
Yeah.
And he's left-handed.
Yeah.
And I expected my dad would do what he always does, which is play very well. And if any boy expressed any interest in me, my dad would play sports, humiliate that person, and they would never come back around again. So I thought this was going to happen. I was actually, for the first time in my life, going to beat Manuel at a sport thanks to my dad. It didn't go that way. What happened? My brother and Manuel both hit all the shots to me.
Yes.
And my dad let up on Manuel. And I said, Dad, finish it off. I think we ended up tying. And at the end, he said, I give him a lot of credit. He never gave up. He went after every ball.
Right.
And I think my dad had some respect for that.
That's good.
And I think he also saw that although we're two different cultures, we have a lot in common. Both cultures have a lot of value in family, faith, whatever that is, spiritual or religious, and food. So
lovely. So was it an Indian wedding? Was it a Christian wedding?
So it was going to be both.
Yes.
And unfortunately, my grandfather passed away in January of the year that we got married in July.
Right.
And we were going to cancel the wedding, and my mom insisted that her dad would not have wanted that. He was very excited.
Yes.
They all were happy with us making the decision to solidify our relationship and get married.
Right.
So we went ahead with heavy hearts and proceeded with the Catholic wedding, which was organized by us with Manuel's family in Victoria. And we didn't do the Indian wedding because my mom's heart was very heavy.
No, I understand, yes.
And so we didn't. But I keep telling my husband it's going to happen. and our children can't wait because they've been to family Indian weddings and they'd love to be a part of it. So it may happen, maybe our 25th wedding anniversary.
I think that's a very good idea. Let's take a short break and come back. Nomita is our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Women in Focus. Nomita Bali is our Woman in Focus today. I'm laughing because there's so many things I want to ask you, Nomita, but I know that I'm going to ask you things that you'll have to explain to me, and then the interview will continue getting bigger and bigger. You wanted to climb a mountain. So remember that. I want to ask you a little bit about that. But before we do that, getting married to Manuel and having your 3 children, did you stop working? Did you continue working?
So at the time when I got married, I was a Crown prosecutor. So I went to part-time once I had children and still did Crown work, loved it. But I realized quite quickly, given my personality and how driven I am in every trial that I did, that it was really hard to do both jobs well, the way I wanted to. So after my second child, after he was a year old, so I have, my oldest is Mateus, and my middle son is Merrick. So when Merrick was just 2, I left the Crown job. So I did part-time work on a contract, and it was the best experience for me. After that, I did a little bit of different jobs. I did Bridges legal work, where I was on call 24 hours for a myriad of different legal issues, which kept me involved in the practice of law. And then I had a third child, Maxim, and after having him, I had to decide whether I was going to continue practicing law or whether I was going to leave it, because you have to practice 3 years of a 5-year period. I realized that if I left the practice of law, I wouldn't be complaining about the fish that got away. I'd be complaining about the career that got away, and I would have forgotten how much I loved it. So I decided to go back to work in government. And I'm still with the Ministry of Attorney General as a solicitor. So I advise corrections, adult and youth, some court services branch and police services. But I have a desk job that allows me to run around and look after my children and drive them to all of their elite sports.
That's good. And you found some time during all this last year to go and climb the 4th highest mountain of the world, the largest mountain in Africa, Kilimanjaro.
This was the next life-changing experience. It has changed me in so many ways, but we don't have time to talk about all of those ways. How it came about was a couple years ago, one of my kids said, "Mom, no offense or anything, but you don't know what it's like because you're not an athlete like the rest of us." So there's a common theme in my interview with you. That didn't sit very well with me. And I thought, oh, I think you're underestimating your mom. It's true that I'm not an athlete like they are, playing team sports. I had always wanted to climb Mount Kilimanjaro because it was a tradition in the Bali family for all the males to do it. And recently we had my cousin in California, female cousin, who had climbed it. And I thought, what's stopping me from doing it? And I thought...
But climbing a mountain is like a very difficult job, isn't it?
It is.
And it's 19,000 feet high. I mean, Mount Everest is 29,000? So this is just 10,000 feet less than Mount Everest. So it's a high mountain.
It is. It's 19,600 feet.
Yes.
But it's not as hard of a trek. But I knew that Mount Kilimanjaro, what I had been told was, it is a mind over matter experience. And it is a slow and steady climb. The last day is the hardest. So that is a steep incline. That was going to be the hardest. So what I knew about myself was that if I'm someone who has always kept myself in fairly good shape, I am active, I thought, if this is something I really want to do, I need to show my boys and my husband I'm not afraid to fail. So I fully expected that I may not get to the top because of the altitude. The altitude is something that it hits people
Yes.
regardless of their athletic ability or their
For
age.
sure, yes.
And regardless of how much training and preparation they have. So some of it is left to complete chance and luck. But I trained myself both mentally and physically. I physically trained myself by exercising and walking and training with my two boys. And they had some intense training before they went to Europe last summer
Right.
for sports. So I trained with them in the back of their class, and that gave me some cardiovascular endurance and strength. And then I also took a meditation class to help me with focusing and mindfulness, exercising compassion, and not being afraid of failure, but accepting whatever outcome the mountain was going to give me. The actual climb was beautiful, breathtaking, even more special because I had my cousin go with me. And I give all the credit because she's a teacher, and she was the force that actually had it happen.
Great. What are the things that you want to do?
I haven't thought much about those things, but I know there will be many.
I would be surprised if they weren't.
I do want to go to India.
Yeah.
That's my goal. So
Yeah.
going to Africa after our kids'
Yeah.
sports last summer was on my bucket list to
Right.
introduce the children to beautiful
Right.
continent of Africa and my family there.
Right.
Next, I want to take them to India.
Yeah.
We have some extended family and friends there, so I want to take them there before they go off to university and have no
Right.
time to travel. I'm thinking about possibly doing a half marathon because I've been told that I have a lot more stamina than I give myself credit for.
Oh, good for you.
So I might try to do that, and
All
I
right.
might do another charity component to doing that, just like I did for Mount Kilimanjaro.
Fantastic. It's lovely to know the other side of Susie. Thank you for being our Woman in Focus today.
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk with you.
Nomita has been our Woman in Focus today. Don't go away. We'll be right back.